Over the summer, you may have noticed Lake Michigan's high tide. The unusually high lake levels swallowed up beaches in Rogers Park and flooded parts of the lakefront path. All this created hazards for boaters, fishermen, and swimmers alike, and raised concerns that this is just the beginning of how the Midwest will experience the effects of climate change.
A year ago, we were a foot lower than we are today. So just in the past 12 months, because of wet conditions, we've had a very wet spring. Summer was about average, and then actually the month of September, we've had about 35% greater precipitation within the Lake Michigan basin.
Lake Michigan and Lake Huron, which are connected at the Straits of Mackinac in Michigan, peaked in July just 2 inches below their record high in 1986. Since then, their water level has begun its seasonal decline. However, it's still well above last year's level. Last month, Lake Michigan was 13 inches higher than its level during the same time last year. At just over 581 feet, Lake Michigan's water level is 30 inches above its long-term average, and just 4 inches below its record high. While the lake's water level is expected to continue declining until February, it's projected to remain above the levels of a year ago, entering the new year higher than it did the previous year. Meanwhile, each of the other Great Lakes has broken records for monthly highs. Lake Superior and Lake Erie surpassed their records in May, June, July, and September, as did Lake Ontario for most of the summer. The high level for Lake Michigan is a drastic increase from January 2013, when the lake hit a record low.
In that period, we've increased over 5 feet in a period of 5 years. That's by and large, when we look at the past 100 years of record, that change from low to high in a period of 5 years is the fastest the fastest rate on record. That's an indication of big swings of extremes, and so that may be the new norm.
The rising levels of the Great Lakes come with concerns of climate change in general. Last month, young people across the world followed the lead of the 16-year-old Swedish teenager Greta Thunberg, taking to the streets to demand greater action on global warming from world leaders. And a recent United Nations report found that sea levels are rising more than twice as fast as in the previous century, and accelerating. DePaul alum and longtime advocate for ocean conservation Bailey Ritter says she wasn't surprised by the report.
I think what was most shocking was that I was not shocked. I think I read it and I was like, yep, those are the issues.
In addition to the rising ocean levels, the rising temperature of the ocean and destruction of marine life also stood out to Ritter.
A lot of people I don't think realize that the Great Lakes are connected to the ocean. There is a direct connection through the St. Lawrence Seaway all the way out east to the ocean.
Though the cause of the rising levels of the Great Lakes is different than that of the oceans, it is still generating concerns among experts. Flooding is predicted to be one of the largest ways the Midwest experiences climate change, and is a major concern as Lake Michigan rises.
The fact of the matter is, the increase in flooding of rivers, of just communities so far from Lake Michigan, that is all a cause or effect of climate change. These increased bouts of severe weather patterns, that's climate change.
Lake Michigan has now begun its seasonal decline, though at a much slower rate than years prior. And its water level is still well above average, posing dangers for Chicagoans this fall.
If we look at the historic record, primarily the largest storms occur in the fall time period of October and November. And so when you have elevated lake levels like we do right now, those storms can cause greater erosion and storm damage with the higher lake levels. And so that's why we're most concerned at this point.
He has said that putting in coastal protection is an expensive project, so Chicago is focused on more short-term solutions, including flooding prevention.
The city of Chicago right now has installed temporary Jersey barriers in many parts of the shoreline to address that overtopping and then flooding associated with the elevated lake levels.
However, DePaul environmental communication professor Barbara Willard is concerned about the effects of the rising lake levels and the city's plans to address this issue.
A concern I have is the way that they are approaching the rising lake levels, and that's to put up more big rocks, more concrete or Jersey barriers. You see those all over, which is short term. It's going to help save people. They won't be swished right up into the Lake Michigan, but it is problematic in that it really is not solving the ultimate problem, which is what we need to go back to restoring a more natural lake ecosystem and natural shoreline.
Willard says she would like to see beaches turn to more natural solutions, allowing some sandy areas to return to their native landscaping. She points to Kathy Osterman Beach in Lincoln Park, which sectioned off a portion of the beach for this a few years ago.
Once you allow that to happen, you start to see the native grasses growing and native vegetation. You start to see more of a duneland kind of a landscape. And that is a more long-term natural way of dealing with rising lake levels.
Boccaro said there is value in restoring the shoreline with natural features. However, most of Chicago's shore was constructed in the 1900s, so returning to its natural state is nearly impossible. If Lake Michigan researchers stand correct in their predictions, extreme lake levels, whether low or high, could become the new normal, and Chicagoans will have no choice but to address it. For Good Day DePaul, I'm Marissa Nelson.